Nobody believed Sara Blakely would become a billionaire. Not because her idea was too dangerous, not because the market was crowded. People dismissed her because the idea sounded ridiculous. A woman cutting the feet off her pantyhose in a tiny apartment was not supposed to build a global empire. At the time, Sara was driving across Florida for hours every single day, knocking on doors, trying to sell fax machines to strangers who barely looked her in the eyes. Most days ended with rejection, cold faces, forced smiles, doors closing before she could finish her sentence. But something strange was happening during those endless failures. Every rejection was teaching her how people think, how they hesitate, how they doubt, how they instantly kill ideas that make them uncomfortable, and without realizing it, she was becoming unstoppable. What makes this story different is that Sara did not come from money. She had no investors, no business degree, no fashion experience, no powerful connections waiting to open doors for her. She only had $5,000 in savings and an idea nobody took seriously. An idea born from frustration. An idea created in front of a bathroom mirror. An idea that would eventually change an entire industry forever. But before the billion-dollar company, before the magazine covers, before becoming one of the most powerful self-made women in America, there was humiliation. There were nights filled with uncertainty, moments where quitting would have been easier, moments where the world practically begged her to give up. And the craziest part? The people rejecting her had no idea they were speaking to a future billionaire. Because sometimes the difference between ordinary people and legends is simple. One person stops after rejection. The other uses rejection as fuel. And Sara Blakely was about to prove what happens when someone refuses to let the world define their limits. Sara Blakely was rejected so many times that most people would have stopped counting. But one rejection hit differently. It happened during the early days of Spanx, when she was desperately trying to convince manufacturers to create her product. She had already spent months refining the idea in silence, protecting it like a secret because deep down, she feared people would laugh at her. And many of them did. Factory owners looked at her with confusion the second she explained the concept. Some barely let her finish speaking. Others rejected her immediately. A few acted like the idea was completely absurd. To them, she was just another inexperienced woman with a random idea and no credibility, no fashion background, no company, no proof, no reason to believe her. One manufacturer after another told her no, but there was one moment she never forgot. After another rejection, Sara sat alone, questioning whether everyone else could see something she could not. Maybe the idea really was stupid. Maybe she was wasting years of her life chasing something impossible. That is what rejection does to people. It slowly attacks identity before it destroys ambition. And this is where most dreams die quietly. Not because the idea lacks potential, because constant rejection makes people stop trusting themselves. But Sara noticed something important during that dark period. The people rejecting her were not her customers. The men sitting inside those offices did not understand the frustration women felt every single day wearing uncomfortable undergarments. They were judging a problem they had never personally experienced. That realization changed everything. Instead of asking herself, why do they hate this idea, she started asking, what if they simply cannot see what I see yet? That single mental shift kept her alive in the game long enough to find the one opportunity capable of changing her entire future. And what happened next would prove that sometimes rejection is not a stop sign. Sometimes it is a filter, separating people who quit from people who create history. Before the billion-dollar empire, before television interviews and global recognition, Sara Blakely was just another exhausted salesperson driving through Florida with a box full of fax machines in the back of her car. Every morning started the same way. Cheap coffee, long highways, office buildings filled with strangers already prepared to say no before she even opened her mouth. She was 20-something years old, sweating under the pressure of commission sales, walking into businesses where nobody was waiting for her. Every conversation felt like a battle for attention. Most people never understand how brutal door-to-door sales really are. You learn very quickly that rejection is personal when someone interrupts you mid-sentence, avoids eye contact, or shuts the door without hesitation. And Sara experienced that feeling constantly, but hidden inside that painful routine was a skill that would later make her unstoppable. She was unknowingly training herself to survive discomfort. Every rejection forced her to control emotions. Every awkward interaction taught her confidence. Every humiliating moment sharpened her ability to communicate under pressure. While other people feared hearing no, Sara was hearing it dozens of times every single day. That changes a person. It builds emotional endurance most entrepreneurs never develop. But behind the forced smiles and sales pitches, Sara carried something much heavier. A quiet fear that her life would never become anything bigger than this. She remembers looking around and wondering if this was all adulthood really was. Endless routines, endless exhaustion, endless survival. That fear started eating at her slowly, because deep down she knew she was capable of more. She just had no idea what that more looked like yet. And this is the dangerous stage where most people surrender permanently. Not because they lack talent, because routine slowly convinces them to stop dreaming. But Sara never fully accepted that life. Even while failing, even while struggling, even while driving alone for hours, part of her still believed something bigger was waiting. She just did not know that the frustration she felt every single day was secretly preparing her for the idea that would transform her future forever. And the strange part? That life she hated so much was about to become the exact reason she could survive the brutal journey ahead. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid failure. Sara Blakely was trained to see it differently. When she was growing up, her father used to ask an unusual question at the dinner table. What did you fail at this week? Not what did you achieve? Not what did you win? What did you fail at? And if Sara had no answer, her father would actually feel disappointed, because inside their house, failure meant something important. It meant you were trying. It meant you were risking embarrassment. It meant you were stepping outside comfort while everyone else stayed safe. That lesson changed the way her brain reacted to rejection long before she became an entrepreneur. Most people hear no and immediately connect it to shame. Sara slowly learned to connect it to progress. That psychological difference became one of the most powerful hidden advantages of her entire life. Because the truth is brutal, building anything extraordinary guarantees humiliation. People will doubt you before they admire you. They will question you before they celebrate you. They will laugh before they applaud. And Sara had unknowingly spent years preparing for exactly that reality. Even before Spanx existed, she had already failed repeatedly. She failed the LSAT test. She failed career expectations. She failed at finding direction early in life. At one point, she even worked at Disney and got rejected after only 3 months. Most people would interpret those moments as evidence they were not special. Sara interpreted them differently. Every failure became proof that she was still moving. That mindset created emotional freedom. She stopped obsessing over looking successful. She became obsessed with continuing forward. And that is rare, because fear of embarrassment destroys more dreams than lack of talent ever will. Sara understood something most people never realize. The moment you stop fearing failure, you become dangerous. You start taking risks other people avoid. You start surviving situations that emotionally crush everyone else. You stop needing constant approval to keep moving. And that mentality would soon become critical, because the idea that was about to enter her life would sound so strange, so uncomfortable, and so easy to mock that without this mindset, she probably would have abandoned it immediately. But Sara Blakely had already trained herself to survive failure. Now she was about to discover what happens when someone with that mindset finally finds the right idea. The idea that created Spanx did not arrive inside a boardroom. There were no investors, no brainstorming sessions, no team of experts searching for the next billion-dollar opportunity. It happened in front of a bathroom mirror. Sara was getting ready for a party when frustration hit her again. She wanted to wear a pair of white pants, but every option she tried underneath looked terrible. Traditional pantyhose showed lines, felt uncomfortable, and ruined the look she wanted. So she did something random. She grabbed a pair of control-top pantyhose and cut the feet off. That was it. One small decision, one uncomfortable problem, one improvised solution inside a tiny apartment. But the strange part came next. The moment she looked in the mirror, something clicked instantly. Her clothes fit better, her body looked smoother, she felt more confident. And suddenly her brain would not let the idea go. Most people experience moments like this and move on within minutes. Sara could not stop thinking about it. That is one of the hidden differences between ordinary thinking and entrepreneurial thinking. Entrepreneurs notice problems emotionally. They become obsessed with tiny frustrations most people accept as normal. And Sara started realizing millions of women were probably experiencing the exact same issue every single day. The problem was obvious once she saw it. Women wanted to feel confident in their clothes without suffering through uncomfortable products designed decades earlier. But despite how simple the idea sounds today, at the time it felt risky, awkward, and almost embarrassing to discuss openly. Nobody talked comfortably about shapewear. Nobody built exciting brands around it. The industry felt outdated, clinical, and disconnected from real women. Yet Sara sensed something powerful hiding inside that discomfort. Sometimes the biggest business opportunities exist inside conversations people avoid having. And once that thought entered her mind, she could not escape it anymore. The idea followed her everywhere, during work, during long drives, late at night, early mornings. It stopped feeling like a random thought and started feeling like a mission. But there was one major problem. She had absolutely no idea how to turn an idea into a real product. No manufacturing experience, no fashion knowledge, no roadmap, just intuition. And that intuition was about to push her into one of the hardest and loneliest phases of her life. The fashion industry did not reject Sara Blakely because the product was weak. They rejected her because the idea exposed something uncomfortable. For decades, the industry had been designing products based on what companies wanted to sell, not what women actually wanted to wear. And Sara could feel that disconnect immediately. The more she researched the market, the more frustrated she became. Everything looked outdated: cold packaging, uncomfortable designs, brands speaking to women like products instead of human beings. Nobody was creating solutions that felt empowering, modern, or honest. And that is when Sara realized something dangerous. The people dominating the industry were not listening closely enough to real customers anymore. That realization gave her confidence, but it also made her a threat. Because industries hate outsiders who expose blind spots, especially outsiders with no credentials. Factory owners dismissed her, executives ignored her, professionals talked down to her. To them, she was unqualified. But Sara noticed something strange during those conversations. The women reacted completely differently. Whenever she explained the idea to female friends, their faces changed instantly. They understood the problem without explanation because they had lived it themselves. That contrast became impossible to ignore. The experts rejected the idea. The customers understood it immediately. And this is where many entrepreneurs make a fatal mistake. They trust industry approval more than customer emotion. Sara chose the opposite path. Instead of chasing validation from powerful people, she focused on the emotional reaction from ordinary women. That decision changed everything, because emotional connection creates markets faster than expert analysis ever will. Sara was not selling fabric. She was selling confidence, comfort, freedom, control. And the moment she understood that, the product stopped being shapewear. It became identity. That psychological shift transformed the entire direction of the company before it even officially existed. But there was still one massive obstacle standing in front of her. She needed someone willing to manufacture the product. And after endless rejections, she was getting dangerously close to losing hope completely, until one unexpected phone call changed the entire trajectory of her future. Sara Blakely did not start with investors. She did not raise millions. She did not know wealthy people. She did not come from Silicon Valley. There was no safety net waiting to protect her if everything collapsed. She had $5,000. That was the entire foundation of the future billion-dollar company. And the terrifying part was that every decision suddenly mattered. One mistake could erase everything. While other startups hired teams, rented offices, and built presentations, Sara was doing everything herself from her apartment, researching patents late at night, calling manufacturers during lunch breaks, sketching product ideas by hand, writing notes everywhere, trying to sound confident while secretly feeling completely lost. Most people romanticize entrepreneurship because they only see success after it becomes visible. They never see the early stage, the uncertainty, the isolation, the constant fear that you might be wasting your life chasing something impossible. Sara lived inside that pressure every single day, and because money was limited, she became resourceful in ways most people never have to become. She could not afford lawyers, so she studied trademark applications herself. She could not afford consultants, so she learned by asking endless questions. She could not afford marketing agencies, so she relied on instinct and observation. That pressure sharpened her thinking. When people have unlimited resources, they often become careless. Scarcity forced Sara to become precise. But emotionally, the hardest part was pretending confidence while feeling uncertainty internally. Nobody around her fully understood what she was trying to build. Friends questioned her choices. People assumed the project was temporary. Some quietly believed she was making a mistake. And the truth is, there were moments where Sara questioned herself too. Late at night, fear becomes louder. What if the manufacturers are right? What if nobody buys this? What if I lose everything for an idea people laugh at? Those thoughts followed her constantly. But there was one thing stronger than fear. She genuinely believed women needed this product. That belief kept her moving when logic suggested quitting. And eventually, after countless failed conversations and endless persistence, something unexpected happened. One manufacturer finally agreed to listen. Not because the business opportunity looked convincing, because his daughters told him Sara was right. That single opening would become the first crack in the wall that had been blocking her dream from reality. And what happened next proved that one opportunity is all a relentless person truly needs. Most people think being underestimated is a weakness. For Sara Blakely, it became one of her greatest advantages. Nobody in the industry was paying attention to her. No major competitors saw her as dangerous. No executives were worried about her tiny idea. No powerful brands believed a woman with $5,000 could disrupt an entire market. And because of that, Sara was free. Free to experiment, free to make mistakes, free to build differently while nobody was watching closely. That invisibility became powerful. When industries notice you too early, they often crush you before you grow. But Sara moved beneath the radar long enough to create something unique. She was not trapped by traditional thinking, because nobody had taught her the correct way to build a fashion company. That ignorance became creative freedom. Instead of copying the cold corporate tone used by competitors, she built a brand that sounded human, funny, honest, confident. The packaging felt different. The messaging felt different. Even the product name felt different. Spanx did not sound elegant or luxurious. It sounded memorable, and that mattered. Sara understood something most businesses still fail to understand. People remember emotion before they remember products. Every detail of the company reflected personality instead of corporate perfection. While competitors acted formal and distant, Sara spoke directly to women like a friend who genuinely understood their frustrations. That emotional authenticity created trust instantly. But being ignored also created another hidden advantage. She stopped chasing approval. When nobody expects greatness from you, something changes psychologically. You become less afraid of embarrassment because there is no reputation left to protect. Sara leaned into that freedom completely. She cold-called people fearlessly. She pitched strangers directly. She walked into opportunities other people were too intimidated to approach. Because when the world already doubts you, risk starts feeling less dangerous. And slowly, without realizing it, Sara was building more than a company. She was building momentum, the kind of momentum that looks invisible at first, the kind that grows quietly before exploding suddenly. But momentum alone was not enough. Now she needed one breakthrough powerful enough to force the world to finally notice her. And that breakthrough was about to arrive in the most unexpected way possible. Sara Blakely was trying to build a product for women inside an industry controlled mostly by men. And the deeper she entered that world, the more absurd the situation became. Men were designing products they would never wear, approving solutions they would never personally need, making decisions about comfort, confidence, and body image without truly understanding any of it. Sara could feel the disconnect immediately. In meetings, people looked uncomfortable discussing the product. Some executives treated the entire concept like a joke. Others spoke to her with the kind of polite dismissal reserved for people they do not take seriously. And underneath all of it was one clear message: you do not belong here. No experience, no connections, no authority. Just a woman with an idea nobody respected yet. But Sara noticed something important during those interactions. The industry had become disconnected from real emotional needs. Companies were focused on technical products. Sara was focused on human psychology. That difference changed everything, because women were not secretly searching for more fabric. They were searching for confidence, relief, comfort, control over how they felt in their own clothes. And unlike the corporations around her, Sara understood that emotionally because she lived it herself. That authenticity became impossible to fake. The more resistance she faced, the clearer her mission became. She was no longer trying to simply sell shapewear. She was fighting against an industry that had stopped listening carefully enough to its own customers. And the pressure was intense. Every meeting forced her to defend herself. Every rejection pushed her into uncomfortable territory. Every conversation tested whether she truly believed in the vision or not. Most people break under that kind of pressure because rejection slowly creates self-doubt. But something unusual started happening to Sara instead. The resistance made her more certain. Every dismissive reaction confirmed that the industry was blind to what women actually wanted. And when conviction reaches that level, fear starts losing power. That is when entrepreneurs become dangerous. Not when they have money, not when they have fame, when they stop needing permission to continue. And Sara was reaching that point fast. Soon she would walk into an opportunity capable of changing her life forever. But before the breakthrough came humiliation, powerful enough to make almost anyone quit completely. Sara Blakely built the first version of Spanx almost entirely alone. No glamorous office, no creative team, no investors guiding the process, just late nights, uncertainty, and an obsession she could no longer ignore. While the world slept, Sara sat on the floor of her apartment studying fabrics, testing designs, and trying to solve problems nobody around her fully understood. Every detail mattered. How tight should the material feel? How could it smooth the body without becoming painful? How could women feel supported without feeling trapped? She kept adjusting everything repeatedly because she knew one truth most businesses ignore. If the product does not genuinely help people, no marketing strategy can save it for long. And yet, despite all her effort, there was a strange loneliness surrounding the process. She could not fully explain her vision to people. Most would not understand it anyway, so she worked quietly, protecting the idea, refining it privately, carrying the pressure internally while pretending life was normal on the outside. That silence became emotionally exhausting. Because when you are building something uncertain, your mind becomes a battlefield. One moment you feel unstoppable, the next moment you feel delusional. Sara lived inside that emotional swing constantly. There were nights where she felt convinced the idea could change her future, and there were nights where she questioned whether she had lost touch with reality completely. But she kept going, not because she had guarantees, because she could not ignore the feeling that this mattered. And eventually, after endless adjustments and failed attempts, she finally held something real in her hands. The first true prototype. For most people, it would have looked small and insignificant, but for Sara it represented proof. Proof that the idea was no longer trapped inside her imagination. Proof that years of frustration had transformed into something tangible. Proof that maybe, just maybe, this impossible vision could actually survive in the real world. But creating the product was only the beginning. Now came the terrifying part. She needed people to buy it. And the next opportunity she received would place everything she had sacrificed on the line at once. Getting the product made was difficult. Getting people to notice it was even harder. Sara Blakely knew her future depended on one thing now. She needed Spanx inside major department stores. Without visibility, the company would die quietly before it ever had a chance to grow. But there was a problem. Nobody knew who she was. Imagine walking into massive retail stores filled with established brands worth millions of dollars while carrying a product created by a woman working alone from her apartment. That was her reality. Every meeting felt uneven from the start. Executives listened politely while silently questioning her credibility. Some dismissed the product immediately. Others showed interest but hesitated to take the risk. Because placing a new product on shelves is expensive. If it fails, everyone notices. And Sara had no proof that customers would actually buy it. Only conviction. But conviction alone rarely impresses corporations. So she did something most founders would never dare to do. She sold the product herself directly to decision makers. Not with polished presentations, not with complicated business language, with emotion. Sara understood the product better than anyone because she was the customer first. She demonstrated it personally, explained the frustration women experienced, explained how clothes looked better, explained how confidence changed when women felt comfortable in their own bodies. And slowly, something started happening. The energy inside those conversations shifted, because authenticity is difficult to ignore, especially when someone believes so deeply in what they are saying. Then came the moment that could either launch the company or destroy it completely. A major department store agreed to test the product. One chance, one opening, one tiny space on shelves surrounded by giant competitors, and suddenly the pressure became terrifying. Because now there were only two possible outcomes. Either customers would ignore Spanx completely, or Sara Blakely's entire life was about to change forever. She had risked her savings, her time, her reputation, her future. Now the market would decide whether the world saw her as foolish or visionary. And what happened next shocked everyone, including Sara herself. For months, Sara Blakely had been fighting for attention, begging buyers to notice the product, convincing stores to take risks, hoping customers would give Spanx a chance. Then suddenly, everything changed overnight. And it happened because one woman with enormous influence genuinely loved the product: Oprah Winfrey. At the time, Oprah's recommendations had almost mythical power. If she talked about something publicly, millions of people immediately paid attention. But Sara did not have connections to Oprah. No massive campaign, no celebrity partnership strategically planned by marketing experts. The product reached Oprah because people were talking about it naturally. That is what made the moment so powerful. The excitement was real. When Oprah named Spanx one of her favorite products, the effect was immediate and explosive. Demand skyrocketed. Phones would not stop ringing. Orders flooded in faster than Sara could process mentally. The company that had once struggled to be taken seriously suddenly became impossible to ignore. But behind the excitement was chaos, because rapid success creates a different kind of pressure. Now Sara had to prove the company was not just a temporary trend. She had to scale production, manage growth, protect the brand, make decisions faster than ever before, and emotionally, the transformation felt surreal. Not long earlier, she had been driving alone trying to sell fax machines. Now one of the most influential women in America had introduced her company to the world. That kind of shift can break people psychologically. Some lose control, some become arrogant, some panic under the weight of sudden success. But Sara stayed focused on one thing: the customer experience, because deep down she understood why the product was exploding. Women did not just buy Spanx because Oprah mentioned it. They bought it because the product solved a real emotional problem. Confidence, comfort, relief. And once women experienced that feeling, they talked about it relentlessly. That emotional connection became stronger than advertising itself. The company was no longer growing because of marketing alone. It was growing because women trusted each other's experiences more than corporate messaging. And that kind of momentum is almost impossible to stop once it begins. But success creates new enemies. The bigger Spanx became, the more attention it attracted from competitors, critics, and people waiting for Sara to fail publicly. And the next challenge would test whether she was truly capable of protecting the empire she had built from nothing. Most companies spend millions trying to convince people to care. Sara Blakely built something different. She created a product people genuinely wanted to talk about. That changed everything. Because the strongest marketing in the world is not advertising. It is emotion powerful enough that customers voluntarily share their experience with others. And that is exactly what started happening with Spanx. Women were not quietly buying the product and moving on. They were telling friends, calling family members, talking about it in dressing rooms, recommending it during conversations that companies could never manufacture artificially. The product spread like a secret people felt excited to share, and Sara understood why. Traditional brands spoke to women like corporations. Spanx spoke to women like a real person. Funny, honest, human. The company never felt cold or distant. Even the way Sara communicated publicly felt authentic compared to polished executives reading scripted lines. Women trusted her because she sounded like someone who actually understood their daily frustrations. That trust became priceless. Customers no longer felt like buyers. They felt understood. And when people feel emotionally understood, loyalty becomes incredibly powerful. This is where many businesses fail completely. They focus on selling products instead of creating emotional identity. Sara was never only selling shapewear. She was selling the feeling women experienced when they looked in the mirror and felt confident again. That emotional transformation turned ordinary customers into passionate advocates. And the momentum became unstoppable because every satisfied customer created new customers naturally. No massive campaigns, no manipulative corporate messaging, just people talking honestly about something that genuinely improved their lives. But while the public was falling in love with Spanx, Sara was facing a dangerous decision privately. Investors were watching now. Big money was entering the conversation. Powerful people wanted ownership. Most entrepreneurs dream about that moment. Sara Blakely saw a potential trap, because the next decision she made would determine whether she controlled the company or whether the company would eventually control her. Once Spanx started exploding, the offers began arriving fast. Investors, executives, powerful business figures offering money, partnerships, and expansion opportunities that most entrepreneurs spend their entire lives chasing. To the outside world, it looked obvious. Take the money, scale faster, grow bigger, cash out. That is what people expected Sara Blakely to do. But Sara saw something most people completely missed. Money always comes attached to control. The moment outside investors enter a company, the pressure changes. Decisions become political. Vision becomes diluted. Growth starts serving shareholders instead of customers. And Sara was terrified of losing the emotional authenticity that made Spanx special in the first place. Because she knew exactly why women trusted the brand. It felt real. The moment corporations started shaping every decision, that connection could disappear. So she made a move that shocked the business world. She refused outside investors. No venture capital, no surrendering ownership, no giving strangers the power to redefine the company she had built from pain, instinct, and obsession. That decision was incredibly risky, because without massive outside funding, every mistake becomes more dangerous. Growth becomes harder. Pressure becomes heavier. But Sara valued freedom more than rapid expansion. And that mindset separated her from many founders who eventually lose control of the very companies they created. She was not building Spanx to impress investors. She was building it to protect the original mission. That level of conviction is rare once money enters the picture, because success changes people. The attention becomes addictive. The validation becomes intoxicating. The temptation to chase endless growth becomes difficult to resist. But Sara stayed anchored to something deeper: independence. She wanted the freedom to make bold decisions without asking permission from people who never understood the customer emotionally in the first place. And because she protected that control early, Spanx kept its personality, while other brands slowly became corporate machines. That decision eventually transformed Sara Blakely into one of the richest self-made women in the world. But the money was never the most important part of her story. The real lesson was psychological. Sara proved that protecting your vision can sometimes become more valuable than chasing approval, status, or short-term expansion. And after years of rejection, humiliation, and doubt, the woman nobody believed in was now impossible to ignore. But the most important truth about her journey still had not been revealed. Most people look at Sara Blakely's story and focus on the money, the billionaire status, the success headlines, the global company, the fame. But that is not what made her extraordinary. The real difference was psychological. Sara understood something most entrepreneurs never fully grasp. People do not buy products first. They buy emotional transformation. That is why Spanx exploded, while countless competitors disappeared quietly. The company was never built around fabric alone. It was built around how women wanted to feel. Confident, comfortable, powerful, in control. Sara understood that emotionally because she lived the problem herself. And that authenticity created trust. No business strategy can fake. But there was another hidden reason behind her success that almost nobody talks about. She was willing to look ridiculous longer than other people. That sounds simple, it is not. Most dreams die during the awkward phase, the phase where nobody understands your vision, the phase where success has not arrived yet, the phase where people secretly pity you while you continue believing anyway. That phase destroys people emotionally because humans are wired to seek social approval. Sara survived it, not because she was fearless, because she stopped allowing embarrassment to control her decisions. That psychological freedom changed everything. While other people waited for permission, Sara acted. While others overanalyzed risk, she experimented. While others protected their image, she protected the vision. And slowly those small decisions compounded into something massive. This is what most entrepreneurs still misunderstand. Success is rarely built in glamorous moments. It is built privately, quietly, repeatedly, inside uncomfortable conversations, inside rejection, inside uncertainty, inside moments where quitting feels completely reasonable. Sara Blakely became extraordinary because she continued moving while emotionally carrying all of that pressure at once. And eventually the world called her a genius. But the truth is more uncomfortable. The same world that celebrates successful people often tried to discourage them while they were still struggling. That is why Sara's story matters far beyond business, because it exposes something powerful about human potential. Sometimes the people who change industries are not the loudest, smartest, or most connected people in the room. Sometimes they are simply the ones stubborn enough to keep believing after everyone else stops. And that belief was about to leave behind something far bigger than money. Sara Blakely started with rejection, not inspiration, not support, not opportunity, rejection. People doubted her intelligence, doubted her experience, doubted her product, doubted whether someone like her belonged in business at all. And for years, she kept moving anyway. That is what makes her story unforgettable. Because when people look at billionaires, they usually only see the final version, the polished interviews, the confidence, the success. They do not see the invisible emotional war that happened before anyone cared, the loneliness, the humiliation, the uncertainty. The silent moments where fear becomes so loud it almost convinces you to stop. Sara lived through all of it, and still she kept going. Not because success was guaranteed, because something inside her refused to let rejection define reality. That decision changed her life forever. A woman selling fax machines door to door became the founder of $1 billion empire. A woman ignored by experts transformed an entire industry. A woman with no connections built a global brand from a problem most people considered too small to matter. And maybe that is the most powerful lesson of all. Extraordinary lives rarely begin with extraordinary circumstances. They begin with ordinary people who refuse to quit after being underestimated repeatedly. Sara Blakely's story is not really about shapewear. It is about identity. It is about what happens when someone stops waiting for permission to believe in themselves. Because the world will almost always doubt you before it respects you. People will call your ideas unrealistic before they call them revolutionary. They will question your vision before they admire your courage. And if you are waiting for universal approval before taking action, your future will stay trapped inside other people's limitations. Sara refused to live that way. She used rejection as fuel, pain as direction, failure as preparation, and in doing so, she proved something most people spend their entire lives trying to understand. Sometimes the greatest advantage you can have is being underestimated long enough to build something unstoppable. The same world that ignored her eventually had no choice but to remember her name, Sara Blakely.